My name is Chloe Evans. Today is the day of my arranged date. The man sitting across from me is Ryan Cooper. He's the son of my father's old Marine Corps buddy, a captain just back from a tour. According to my parents, he's solid, responsible, and a good man. Outside the diner window, the late summer leaves in Central Park are just beginning to hint at gold. The afternoon light slants through, glinting off the simple, polished silver of his watch. He sits with a quiet, contained posture, his hands resting on the Formica tabletop. He's classically handsome, strong jaw, clear blue eyes, the kind of looks that belong on a recruitment poster. But his expression is unreadable, a calm mask that gives nothing away. A deep, familiar dread pools in my stomach, cold and heavy. I've done this before. In what I can only think of as my past life, this same scene played out. The same diner booth, the same uncomfortable silence, the same Ryan Cooper sitting across from me. Back then, my heart and my future belonged to someone else. Jason Miller. My childhood sweetheart, the poet, the dreamer with soulful brown eyes who promised me the world before he left for his Peace Corps assignment in South America. "Wait for me, Chloe," he'd said, and I built my entire reality around that plea. So when my parents sat me down and told me they'd arranged for me to meet Ryan, a man they trusted to provide stability and safety, I was furious. I saw him as an obstacle, a symbol of the boring, conventional life that was being forced upon me, keeping me from my dramatic, destined love story with Jason. I went through with the marriage. It was easier than fighting. Ryan married me, I later learned, out of a deep sense of duty and a promise to my father, his own mentor. For 3 years, we lived like polite roommates in a small apartment near his base in Colorado. I never let him touch me. I kept my heart locked away, writing long, yearning letters to Jason, sending him money from the allowance my parents gave me. Ryan never complained. Not once. When my parents asked about grandchildren, he took the blame, saying the timing wasn't right with his career. I thought I was enduring a prison sentence, waiting for my real life to begin. It ended in a fire. A faulty space heater in my writing nook. I remember the choking smoke, the terrifying heat. My last coherent thought wasn't of Jason. It was a shock of pure, stupid regret that I'd never really tried to know the quiet man who shared my home. Then I was floating. A wisp of consciousness above my own smoldering body. I saw him. Ryan. He came tearing into the burning apartment building, ignoring the shouts of the firefighters. His face was a mask of raw, desperate agony I didn't think him capable of. He found me, my body charred and broken, and gathered me into his arms. The sounds he made weren't human. They were the visceral cries of a soul being shredded. He held my ruined form, rocking back and forth, his tears cutting tracks through the soot on his cheeks. "Chloe Snow. Chloe." The pain in his voice was a physical hook in my ghostly chest. I, who had felt nothing for him for 3 years, was paralyzed by the depth of his grief. I became a silent shadow tethered to him. For 10 years I watched. I watched as the calm, disciplined soldier vanished, replaced by a man of singular, terrifying purpose. He meticulously uncovered the truth. The fire wasn't an accident. Jason had returned. Broke, desperate, and entangled with another woman, a wealthy but socially precarious girl named Wendy Vance. They needed money. Jason knew I'd been saving, waiting for him. He came to me, asked for it. When I refused, finally seeing the manipulation behind his pretty words, he panicked. He locked me in that room and set the fire. Ryan hunted them. He used his skills, his contacts, his relentless will. It wasn't justice through the courts. It was a personal, brutal reckoning. I watched him, my ghostly form screaming soundlessly as he became a monster for my sake. The final confrontation in a dusty motel outside El Paso was swift and clinical. When it was done, he stood alone in the desert dawn, looking emptier than the vast landscape around him. He visited my grave in the quiet veterans' cemetery every Sunday. He took care of my parents, moving them to a better house, becoming the son they'd always wanted. When they, racked with guilt, begged him to move on, to find someone else, he'd just shake his head, a silent, final refusal. My ghostly existence was a cycle of watching him work, visit my grave, and sit alone in the dark. The hardest moments were the nights. In the silence of his home, the mask would slip. I'd hear it then, the ragged breath, the soft, broken whispers. "Chloe, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, baby." He blamed himself. For not being home. For not protecting me. For the 3 years of cold silence I had imposed on us. The years marched on, stealing his youth. His hair was solid silver before he turned 50. He earned medals, commanded respect, but the smile that once might have existed never returned. The final act was both predictable and shattering. A school fire. He was nearby. He saw the flames and something in him broke, or perhaps clicked into place. He charged in, found a trapped little girl, got her out and went back for another. The roof collapsed. They buried him next to me. My father, his voice old and cracked, spoke over the twin headstones. Ryan, when you came to me and asked for Chloe's hand, I tried to talk you out of it. I knew she was still hung up on that Miller boy. You didn't say much, just looked me in the eye and said, "Sir, I will spend my life making sure she's safe and cared for. I just need the chance." I knew then you loved her more than any of us realized. That foolish girl, she just never had the eyes to see it. I hope wherever you are you finally get the peace you deserve. The truth was a thunderclap. He had asked for me. His love wasn't a passive obligation. It was a conscious, fervent choice, made long before our first awkward date. A wind I couldn't feel seemed to pull at me. I thought I'd see him again in whatever comes after. But when I opened my eyes, I was blinking against the bright diner light. The smell of coffee and fries filled the air. I was young again, my skin smooth, my heart pounding a frantic, living rhythm in my chest. And there he was. Alive. Ryan Cooper. Sitting across from me, looking painfully young and uncertain. He cleared his throat, misreading my stunned silence and the tears I could now feel streaming down my cheeks. "Look, Miss Evans. Chloe," he said, his voice low and steady but with an undercurrent of resignation. If the idea is too much. If you don't want to be here, just say the word. No expectations. No hard feelings." He thought my tears were for my lost freedom, for Jason. He was already preparing to shoulder the disappointment, to walk away and carry the weight alone, just as he always had. The past and the future collapsed into this single fragile moment. Without a thought, I slid out of the booth. I stumbled around the table, and before he could react, I threw my arms around his neck, burying my face in the crisp, clean cotton of his shirt. He froze, utterly rigid with shock. "I want to be here," I whispered, my voice muffled against his shoulder, trembling with decades of pent-up sorrow and newfound blazing hope. "I want to marry you, Ryan." For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I felt his arms slowly, hesitantly, come up to circle my waist. They were warm, solid, real. The scent of him, soap, starch, and something uniquely, essentially him, filled my senses. It was a scent I'd follow anywhere. This time I would not look away. The next few days were a blur of my parents' shocked delight, hurried preparations, and Ryan's quiet, bewildered efficiency. My sudden about-face, from sullen resistance to fervent agreement, left my mother, Eleanor, suspicious but overwhelmingly relieved. My father, Richard, just clapped Ryan on the shoulder with a look of profound gratitude. Ryan himself was a study in cautious hope. He watched me constantly when he thought I wasn't looking, his blue eyes clouded with a confusion he couldn't voice. He was a man of action, not words, and my emotional tsunami had left him anchorless. Yet he moved heaven and earth to make things right. The night before our quick, simple courthouse wedding, I found a plain white envelope slipped under my bedroom door. Inside was every bit of security he could offer. His entire savings passbook, a list of his service benefits, the deed to a small house on the outskirts of Colorado Springs near his base, and a note in precise, blocky handwriting. "Chloe, everything I have is yours. The house is modest, but it's safe and paid for. I will provide. You will want for nothing. Ryan." I clutched the papers to my chest, remembering a lifetime ago when I'd thrown a similar envelope back in his face, screaming that I didn't want his pity or his boring, safe life. This time, the weight of it in my hands felt like the greatest gift I'd ever received. The wedding was a 10-minute affair. I wore a simple cream-colored dress. Ryan wore his dress uniform. When the judge said, "You may kiss the bride," he leaned in, a perfect gentleman, and brushed his lips so softly against mine it was like the touch of a moth's wing. But his hand holding mine was trembling. My mother wept. My father beamed. And we were gone almost immediately, headed for Denver International Airport and a flight to Colorado. The flight was my first test. The roar of the engines, the pressurized cabin, it all threatened to pull me back into memories of smoke and screaming metal. I gripped the armrests, my knuckles white. "Look at me. Ryan's voice was low, a steady anchor in the auditory chaos. I turned my head. He wasn't looking at the window or the seat back. He was looking directly at me. Breathe with me, Chloe. In. He took a slow, deep breath, his broad chest expanding. I followed. Out. We exhaled together. He didn't let go of my gaze. Just keep looking right here. You're safe. He didn't ask what was wrong. He simply gave me a tool to cope. In that moment, he wasn't just a soldier. He was my lifeguard, pulling me back to a steady shore. By the time we landed, the panic had receded, replaced by a shaky gratitude. Colorado was a punch of brilliant, thin-aired beauty. The Rockies stood sentinel in the distance, purple-hued and capped with eternal snow. The modest house was a charming, boxy mid-century bungalow on a quiet street. It had a scrubby front yard, a porch swing, and a stunning view of Pikes Peak. Inside was Spartan, clean, and overwhelmingly male. Beige walls, a sturdy leather sofa, a bookshelf filled with military histories and technical manuals. It smelled of pine cleaner and fresh paint. I know it's not much, Ryan said, depositing our luggage just inside the door. He stood awkwardly in the center of the living room. You can change anything you want. Paint furniture. It's your home. It's perfect, I said, and I meant it. It was a shell waiting for a life to be built inside. A life I now desperately wanted. That first night, the awkwardness descended like a thick fog. Ryan, true to his impossibly honorable nature, had set up 2 bedrooms. He pointed to the larger master. That's yours. He then picked up his duffel and headed for the smaller, clearly designated guest room. I stood in the hallway warring with myself. The ghost of my past life resentment was weak, but the habits of shyness and the sheer newness of this reality were strong. I let him go. I heard the soft click of his door closing. Lying in the unfamiliar bed, I stared at the ceiling. The silence of the Colorado night was absolute, broken only by the distant cry of a coyote. I thought of him lying alone in that other room, believing he was giving me space, honoring some unspoken boundary. My heart ached for the lonely decades I had witnessed, for the man who had loved so deeply in silence. The next morning I was determined to bridge the gap. I found him in the small utilitarian kitchen, already dressed in fatigues, making coffee with the focused intensity of a field operation. "Good morning," I said, leaning against the doorway. He started slightly as if surprised I was there. "Morning. Coffee's almost ready. I have to report to base by 0700. I'll be back by 1700. There's a PX on base for essentials and a better grocery store in town about 5 miles east." He delivered the information like a briefing. "I'll figure it out," I smiled. "Maybe I'll explore." He nodded, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He handed me one. Our fingers brushed. He pulled his hand back as if shocked. "Sugar's in the cabinet. I don't have any cream. Black is fine." I took a sip. It was strong enough to strip paint. I coughed. He looked instantly contrite. "Too strong. I'm sorry, I'm used to." "It's great," I lied, taking another, more cautious sip. "It'll wake me up." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was there and gone, but it felt like a victory. After he left, the emptiness of the house was profound. I fought the old urge to retreat, to wallow. Instead, I put on a jacket and walked outside. Our next-door neighbor was out watering a patch of stubborn lawn. She was a woman in her 50s with a kind, weathered face and bright eyes. "Well, hello there," she called out, turning off the hose. "You must be the captain's new wife. We heard he was bringing a bride back." I walked over, hand extended. "Chloe Cooper. It's nice to meet you." "Maggie O'Brien," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Welcome to the neighborhood. It's about time that man had some company. He's been in that house alone for 2 years, quieter than a church mouse." We chatted for 20 minutes. Maggie was an Air Force wife, her husband a senior mechanic. She gave me the lay of the land. The best grocery store, the unreliable dry cleaner, the gossip about which officers' wives were friendly and which were snobs. It was a flood of normalcy. "You'll need to get your ID sorted on base," she said. "And you'll want to join the spouses club. They're a good bunch. We look out for each other." "Thank you, Maggie. That sounds wonderful." Her friendliness was a balm. In my first life, I'd hidden from Maggie for months, seeing her as just another part of the military machine I wanted no part of. Now I saw her for what she was. a potential friend, a guide in this new world. When Ryan came home that evening, he found me in the kitchen attempting to make spaghetti. The kitchen looked like a flour bomb had gone off, and the sauce was suspiciously lumpy, but the table was set. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. "You cooked." "I attempted to cook," I corrected, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "It might be inedible. We have emergency sandwiches as backup." He walked over to the stove, peered into the pot and gave the sauce a tentative stir. "It looks enthusiastic." I burst out laughing. It was the first real laugh I'd had in what felt like centuries. The sound seemed to startle him, but then his shoulders relaxed and that faint smile returned. Dinner was in fact barely edible. The pasta was gluey, the sauce both bland and oddly bitter. Ryan ate 2 full plates without a word of complaint. "You don't have to eat it," I finally said, pushing my own plate away. "It's fuel," he said simply. Then he looked up. "Thank you for making it." Later, as we did the dishes, he washed, I dried, he spoke, his voice barely above the sound of the running water. "How was your day? Did you get along all right? I met Maggie. She's lovely. She invited me to a coffee with some of the other wives next week." He paused, a soapy plate in his hand. "That's good. That's really good, Chloe." The way he said my name with a quiet warmth sent a shiver down my spine. The following weekend he took me on base to get my dependent ID. Driving through the gates, past the saluting guards, felt momentous. This was his world, a world of discipline, order, and unspoken codes. I felt a surge of protectiveness. I would learn these codes. I would belong here for him. At the administration building, he introduced me to everyone with a stiff formality. "This is my wife, Chloe." Each time he said the word wife, it sounded like he was testing it, tasting it, and finding it good. A young corporal at the ID office grinned. "Finally, sir. We were starting to think you'd made her up." Ryan just shot him a look that shut him up instantly, but his ears turned pink. That night, after another of my culinary experiments, slightly more successful meatloaf, Ryan sat down on the opposite end of the sofa from me. He held a folded piece of paper. "Chloe," he began, his voice unusually formal. "I know this was abrupt, and I know you're trying. More than I ever expected." He unfolded the paper. It was a printed form already signed by his commanding officer. "Application for certificate of marriage. This makes it official with the military. It's for the records. For your benefits." He hesitated. "If you want to sign it." In my first life I'd never seen this form. I'd refused to engage with any part of his military life. We were married by the state, but never truly joined in the eyes of the institution that was his entire career. I took the pen from his hand. Our fingers touched again, and this time he didn't pull away. I signed my name next to his with a flourish. "Of course I want to sign it," I said softly, looking up at him. "I'm your wife, Ryan. In every way that counts." The air between us crackled with something unspoken, heavy with promise and the ghost of past loneliness. He looked at me, his blue eyes dark and intense, seeing me, really seeing me for the first time. The careful distance he'd maintained since our wedding began to feel very, very thin. He cleared his throat, taking the form back as if it were made of gold leaf. "Okay," he said, the word thick with emotion. "Okay. Progress," I thought as I got ready for bed. Slow, steady, terrifying progress. But we were moving. The Colorado sky outside my window was vast and filled with more stars than I'd ever seen. For the first time, looking at that endless expanse didn't make me feel small and lost. It made me feel like anything was possible. The next challenge, I knew, would be breaking down the final physical barrier between us. The 2 bedrooms. I had a plan for that. But for tonight, the memory of the look in his eyes when I signed that paper was enough. It was a look of dawning, fragile hope. I was determined to fan that hope into a flame that would light up both our lives. My campaign to dismantle the 2-bedroom fortress began the next morning. While Ryan was on his morning run, I moved. I stripped the sheets from the guest bed, hauled the spare pillow and blanket into the master bedroom, and stacked them neatly in the closet. I put a small vase of wildflowers I'd picked from the field behind the house on his nightstand. When he returned, sweat dampened and breathing steady, he paused in the hallway. The door to the guest room was wide open, revealing a bare mattress. He turned his head slowly toward me. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to read the local paper, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room looked dusty. I said, not meeting his eyes. Figured I'd air it out. He didn't say a word. He just walked to the master bedroom, peered inside and saw the evidence of my consolidation. His back was to me, his shoulders tense. He stood there for a full minute. I held my breath. Finally he turned. His expression was unreadable, a mix of shock, longing and sheer terror. Chloe. It's a big bed, I said, my voice coming out softer than I intended. Seems a waste of space is all. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He gave a single sharp nod. I'll shower. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. It was a tactical retreat. I'd take it. The next week was a delicate dance. He continued to sleep in the guest room, but now on the bare mattress with a single blanket. It was his stubborn last line of defense. Meanwhile, I threw myself into making the house a home. With Maggie's help, I ventured to a flea market in town and came back with a riotously colorful Navajo-patterned rug for the living room, a set of rustic wooden bookshelves, and some cheery yellow curtains for the kitchen. Ryan watched the transformation with silent fascination. He'd come home to find a new splash of color, a framed print of the mountains on the wall, the scent of something baking or more often burning. He never complained. He'd just run a hand over the new bookshelf, or stand looking at the curtains for a moment, a faint, puzzled smile on his face. One evening I was wrestling with an ancient sewing machine, trying to hem the new curtains that were still too long. I was muttering curses under my breath, tangled in a bird's nest of yellow thread. Hey, I jumped. Ryan was standing behind me. I hadn't heard him come in. It's defeating me, I sighed, sitting back. He knelt beside the machine. With a few precise, efficient movements, he rethreaded the bobbin, cleared the jam, and then, to my astonishment, guided the fabric under the needle with a steady hand and began to sew a perfectly straight seam. You can sew, I blurted out. He didn't look up, his focus absolute. Field repairs. Uniforms, gear, tents. It's a necessary skill. He finished the hem, snipped the thread and held up the curtain. Will this do? In that moment, seeing this warrior knight bent over a domestic task with such quiet competence, something inside me shifted, melted, and then solidified into a new, unshakable certainty. I loved him. Not out of gratitude or guilt or some cosmic debt. I loved this man, his strength, his silence, his hidden talents, his profound, unwavering decency. It's perfect, I whispered. Our eyes met. The air in the room grew thick and warm. For a long moment we just looked at each other, the curtain forgotten between us. The unspoken thing in the room was no longer just about bedrooms. It was about the vast, uncharted territory of us. He broke the gaze first, standing up abruptly. I'll hang these. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A crisis. I decided to make a pot roast, a dish my mother swore was foolproof. It was not. I somehow managed to set off the smoke alarm with alarming vigor. Acrid gray smoke billowed from the oven as I flapped a dish towel at the shrieking device. Ryan came bolting into the kitchen, his instincts on high alert. He took in the scene, the hysterical alarm, the smoke, my frantic dance, and without a word he moved. He opened the back door and windows, grabbed the flaming roasting pan with an oven mitt, and carried it outside to douse it in the yard. Then he calmly located a step stool, disconnected the smoke alarm battery, and silence, blessed silence, fell. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, covered in a fine layer of flour from earlier, on the verge of tears of frustration. He walked back in, wiping his hands. He looked at my face and the stern set of his mouth softened. He walked over, stopped right in front of me and very carefully with his thumb, wiped a smudge of soot from my cheek. It's just a roast, Chloe, he said, his voice low. It's not a tactical failure. A laugh bubbled up through my threatened tears. Came out as a wet, hiccuping sound. And then he did something extraordinary. He pulled me into his arms. It wasn't a hesitant, polite hug. It was full-bodied and solid, his arms wrapping around me tightly, his chin resting on the top of my head. I froze for a second, then melted against him, fisting my hands in the back of his t-shirt. I could feel the steady, strong beat of his heart against my ear. We stood like that in the wrecked kitchen for a long time, holding on to each other as if we were the only stable things in a tilting world. That night, after a dinner of surprisingly good takeout pizza, he didn't go to the guest room. He followed me to the master bedroom. He stood in the doorway watching as I brushed my hair. The mattress in there is uncomfortable, he stated, his voice rough. I've heard that, I said, my eyes meeting his in the mirror. He walked in, his movements deliberate. He didn't say anything else. He just got ready for bed methodically and then slid under the covers on his side, lying stiffly on his back, staring at the ceiling. I turned off the light and slipped in beside him. The darkness was total, the space between us in the big bed feeling like a canyon. The silence was deafening, filled with the sound of our breathing. Then his hand found mine in the darkness. His fingers laced through mine, calloused and warm and sure. He didn't pull me closer, he just held on. Is this okay? His voice was a rasp in the dark. I squeezed his hand. It's more than okay. We fell asleep like that, hands clasped, a bridge built across the canyon. It was the beginning. The physical shift in our relationship unlocked everything else. Ryan remained a man of few words, but he spoke through action. He started leaving little notes by the coffee pot. Drill field until 1500. Steaks in fridge for tonight. He brought me a book of Colorado wildflowers he'd found at the PX. He taught me how to change a tire on the used Jeep he'd gotten for me, his hands covering mine on the lug wrench, his chest a solid wall at my back. I in turn learned his world. I went to the spouse's coffee with Maggie. I remembered names and ranks. I hosted a small, nervous barbecue for his squad, serving burgers and potato salad I'd actually managed to cook successfully. I saw the way his men looked at him, with respect bordering on reverence, and the way they relaxed when they saw him relax with me, his arm casually slung over the back of my chair. One evening about 3 months in, we were on the porch swing watching the stars emerge over Pikes Peak. My head was on his shoulder, his arm around me. My parents called today, I said into the comfortable silence. They want to visit. See the house. See us. I felt him tense slightly. Do you want them to? I do. I need them to see that I'm happy. Truly happy. He was quiet for a long time, his hand drawing slow circles on my arm. Are you? He asked finally, the question so quiet it was almost lost in the rustle of the aspens. Happy. I lifted my head to look at him. His face was in shadow, but the starlight caught the earnest anxiety in his eyes. This man who had faced enemy fire without flinching, was terrified of my answer. I didn't answer with words. I cupped his face in my hands and kissed him. It wasn't the chaste brush of our wedding day. It was deep and slow and full of every ounce of feeling I had. The regret of a past life, the joy of this one, the profound, staggering love I felt for him. He made a soft sound against my mouth, a surrender, and then his arms locked around me, pulling me onto his lap as the swing creaked in protest. He kissed me back with a hunger that stole my breath, a hunger that had been banked and controlled for far too long. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, I rested my forehead against his. That's my answer, Ryan Cooper. He let out a shaky breath, his forehead still pressed to mine. Good, he whispered, his voice thick. That's really good. The next day he came home with a small velvet box. He didn't get down on one knee, that wasn't his style. He simply took my hand, pressed the box into it and said, I should have given you this before. Inside was a simple, beautiful gold band. It wasn't an engagement ring. It was a wedding band meant to pair with the simple gold band I already wore. It belonged to my grandmother, he said, looking intensely at our joined hands. She said it brought her a lifetime of steadfast love. I want that for you. For us. I slid it onto my finger next to my original band. It fit perfectly. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever been given. He finally smiled then, a real, full, unguarded smile that lit up his whole face and made him look 10 years younger. It was a smile I vowed to see every day for the rest of my life. When my parents arrived the following month, they saw a different daughter. They saw a woman who laughed easily, who bossed her formidable husband around the kitchen, who was tan and healthy from mountain hikes. And they saw a different Ryan. They saw the man who watched their daughter with a look of such naked devotion it brought tears to my mother's eyes. They saw the home we had built together, full of color, books and love. On their last night, my father pulled Ryan aside on the porch. I watched through the window as my father, a man not given to great displays of emotion, clasped Ryan's shoulder and said something that made Ryan duck his head, a humble nod. When they came back in, my father's eyes were suspiciously bright. You did good, kid, he said to me, kissing my forehead. You did real good. As I waved goodbye to their rental car the next morning, Ryan's arm came around my waist, pulling me back against him. I leaned into his strength, watching the dust settle on the road. The ghost of Jason Miller, of the fire of my old life, felt very far away. Here in the clear Colorado air, with this man's heart beating steadily against my back, I was finally home. The foundation was laid, strong and true. Now we could start building the rest of our lives upon it. Happiness, I learned, wasn't a constant state. It was a climate. Our Colorado life settled into a rhythm of clear, sunny days punctuated by the occasional intense but passing storm. The first real tempest arrived with a letter. It was from Jason Miller. I found it mixed in with the usual bills and base circulars, my name written in that achingly familiar looping script I hadn't seen in over a decade of my own subjective time. My blood turned to ice water. The paper felt contaminated. I stood in the small entryway, the cheerful yellow curtains mocking me, staring at the envelope as if it were a live snake. Ryan's footsteps sounded on the porch. I instinctively crumpled the letter in my fist, shoving it into the pocket of my jeans. The guilt was immediate and stomach-churning, but a primal, terrified part of me, the ghost of the girl who died in a fire, wanted to hide this poison from him. "Mail's here," I said, my voice too bright, handing him the harmless stack of envelopes. He took them, his eyes scanning my face. "Ryan missed nothing. Everything okay?" "Fine. Just a headache coming on." I turned toward the kitchen. "I'll start dinner." I burned the letter in the kitchen sink, watching the edges curl and blacken, the ink of my name vanishing into ash before washing it down the drain. I thought that was the end of it. It was a relic, a last gasp from a past that had no power here. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, a battered sedan pulled up in front of our house. I was in the front garden trying and failing to keep a patch of columbines alive under Maggie's direction. I looked up, trowel in hand, and saw him. He was thinner than I remembered, his boyish softness hardened into angular lines. His clothes were worn, his posture carrying a new, permanent slump. But his eyes, when they found me, burned with the same intense, possessive light they always had. "Chloe." He said my name like a sigh, a lament. Every instinct screamed to run inside, lock the door, call for Ryan. But a colder, more calculating part of me, the part forged in the ashes of my own death, rooted me to the spot. I stood up slowly, brushing dirt from my knees. Maggie, sensing the seismic shift in the air, muttered an excuse about checking her pie and vanished next door. "Jason." My voice was flat. "You shouldn't be here." He took a step forward, his gaze sweeping over the house, the garden, me. A flicker of disdain touched his mouth. "So this is it? This is the life you chose? Playing house on the edge of nowhere with a soldier." He said the word like it was something grimy. Anger, hot and clean, cut through my fear. "This is my home. And Ryan is my husband. You need to leave." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Your husband? Right. The guy your daddy picked for you. Tell me, Chloe, does he ever talk about anything besides guns and regulations? Or do you just stare at the mountains together in silence?" His words were chosen to wound, to revive the old doubts of the girl I used to be. But they glanced off the armor of my new life. "You know nothing about him. Or me. Not anymore. Leave. Now." Instead, he took another step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm in trouble, Chloe. Real trouble. Babe. I need to get away. Start fresh. Wendy, she's not who I thought she was." The shift to pleading was instant, practiced. "You were always my true north. I made a mistake. We can still have what we dreamed of. I just need a little help to get on my feet. You have money, I know you do. That soldier must have savings." The audacity was breathtaking. It was also a terrifying echo. In my first life, his pleas had been wrapped in romantic desperation. Now, stripped bare, they were just transactional. "Give me what I want." No, the word was absolute. There is no we. There hasn't been for a very long time. You get no money from me. You get nothing from me. If you don't leave this property, I will call the military police. His face darkened, the pleading mask shattering into something ugly and raw. It was the face I'd seen in the flickering firelight of my memory. "You think you're so safe here? You think that tin pot soldier can protect you from everything? Yo me, Chloe. You led me on for years and then just married the first thing in a uniform your parents threw at you. Get off my property." I repeated, my voice shaking not with fear but with fury. He spat on the ground near my flowers, turned on his heel and got in his car, peeling away with a spray of gravel. I stood there, trembling long after the dust settled. The sunny Colorado afternoon felt sinister. Maggie's front curtain twitched. She'd seen everything. Ryan came home to a wife who was too quiet, who jumped at the sound of the toaster, who pushed her food around her plate. Chloe. He put down his fork. What happened? I wanted to lie. To protect him, to keep the ugliness of my past from touching the sanctuary we'd built. But I had promised myself no more secrets. The ghost had learned that lesson the hard way. Jason Miller was here today. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. Ryan didn't shout. He didn't move. He just went utterly still, every muscle locking down. The calm, attentive man vanished, replaced by the predator I'd seen hunting in my ghostly visions. His eyes, fixed on me, were chips of Arctic ice. Where? Here. In the front yard. He's gone now. What did he want? Money. A fresh start. To rewrite history. I swallowed. He said, threatening things. About you not being able to protect me. Ryan stood up so smoothly it was like he was on springs. He walked to the window, staring out into the gathering twilight, his back rigid. The silence stretched, thick and charged. I burned a letter from him a few weeks ago. I confessed to his back, the words a whisper. I didn't tell you. I'm sorry. He turned then. The cold rage on his face made my breath catch. But it wasn't directed at me. You have nothing to be sorry for. His voice was low, guttural. He does. He came back to the table, knelt beside my chair, a warrior at his lady's feet, and took my cold hands in his. His touch was gentle, but his grip was iron. Listen to me. You are safe. This is my post. My most important mission. He will not touch you. He will not scare you. Do you understand me? I saw it then, the shadow of the man who had spent 10 years carving a path of vengeance across the desert. He was channeling that ferocity now, but with a chilling focus. Defense, not retribution. He was building a fortress around me with his will alone. What are you going to do? I asked, terrified of the answer. My job, he said simply. He stood up. I'll be back late. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Maggie. He changed into his uniform and left. I didn't sleep that night. I paced, I stared out the window, I jumped at every cricket chirp. He came home just before dawn, moving with a silent, weary grace. He smelled of cold night air and coffee. It's handled, he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home to a fortified castle. Handled how? Through channels. A quiet word with the local sheriff, who is ex-army. A check on Mr. Miller's recent activities. It seems he's accrued significant debts with unsavory people in Denver. They are now very interested in his whereabouts. The problem will likely solve itself. If it doesn't, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. The implication was clear. He had other, more direct channels. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt a surge of fierce, possessive pride. My husband was a protector, not a pacifist. He understood the world contained wolves, and he knew how to make them back down. The storm passed. We heard through my parents a month later that Jason had left Colorado abruptly, his family's reputation in tatters after some scandal involving stolen property. The immediate threat was gone. But the encounter changed things. It stripped away the last of our newlywed veneer, forcing a deeper, harder intimacy. Ryan became more vigilant. He taught me basic self-defense moves in the living room. He had a sophisticated security system installed, a rare luxury in our quiet neighborhood. He checked in throughout the day, not out of suspicion but out of a need for confirmation. All clear. You are safe. In turn, my love for him deepened, maturing from grateful affection into something fierce and protective. I saw his scars, physical and emotional, not as flaws, but as evidence of a strength I could now rely on absolutely. It was in this new, fortified climate of trust that I discovered I was pregnant. The news came on a crisp fall morning. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the test, waves of joy and terror crashing over me. A child. A tiny, vulnerable piece of us. In my first life, the very idea would have filled me with dread. Now it felt like the ultimate act of faith in our future. I waited for him to come home for lunch, the test hidden behind my back. When he walked in, I just held it out. He took it, looked at me. His face went through a series of rapid, unguarded transformations. Confusion, dawning comprehension, shock, and then a joy so profound it was almost painful to witness. His eyes shimmered. A baby. His voice was hoarse. I nodded, tears spilling over. He crossed the space between us in 2 strides, crushing me to his chest. He didn't speak for a long time, just held me, his face buried in my hair. When he pulled back, his hands came to rest reverently on my still flat stomach. I will be a good father, he vowed, the words a sacred oath. I will keep you both safe. Always. The pregnancy became our new shared mission. Ryan read baby books with the intensity of military manuals. He built a crib with meticulous precision. He fretted over my diet, my sleep, the weight of the groceries. The stoic captain was utterly undone by the prospect of fatherhood, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Our son, Ethan Richard Cooper, was born on a blustery spring day after a long, difficult labor. Ryan was my rock through every agonizing hour, his calm voice in my ear, his hand to crush. When the tiny, squalling infant was placed in my arms, I looked up and saw Ryan weeping, silent tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. He reached out one trembling finger, and Ethan's miniature hand wrapped around it with a surprising strength. Ryan's breath hitched. "Hello, soldier," he whispered. In that moment, with our new, squirming, perfect root planted firmly in the soil of our love, the last of the ashes from my past life were finally washed away. We were no longer just a couple building a life. We were a family anchored real and forever. Ethan was a quiet, observant baby with Ryan's clear blue eyes and a surprisingly calm disposition. He watched the world from the safety of his father's arms or the sling across my chest with a solemnity that made us laugh. Fatherhood transformed Ryan in subtle, profound ways. The rigid set of his shoulders softened when he rocked his son to sleep. He developed a silly, rumbling voice for reading bedtime stories about construction vehicles. The man who commanded soldiers could spend 20 minutes making ridiculous faces just to earn a gummy, toothless smile. Our little bungalow hummed with a new, chaotic warmth. Baby gear colonized every surface. The scent of formula and lavender lotion mixed with pine and coffee. Maggie became a doting honorary grandmother, and the other military wives formed a practical, cheerful brigade, dropping off casseroles and hand-me-down onesies. Life settled into a sweet, exhausting rhythm. I left my part-time job at the small base library, embracing the all-consuming title of Mom. Ryan's career advanced steadily. He was promoted to major, his responsibilities growing, but he guarded his time at home with fierce priority. "Nothing after 1800 is urgent enough to miss bath time," he'd say, shutting his briefcase with finality. For 3 years, our world was the cozy circumference of home, base, and the stunning Colorado wilderness we explored with Ethan in a backpack carrier. The ghost of my past life was a faint, distant memory, a nightmare I'd finally woken from. Then the first ripple of the wider world reached our mountain haven. It was 1977. News, slower to reach us, began to filter in. The political climate was shifting. And one evening, while Ethan played with blocks at our feet, a news bulletin on the radio mentioned the formal reinstatement of something called the National College Entrance Examination in China, a sign of changing times abroad. My blood ran cold. Not for China. For me. In the jumble of my second chance, in the all-consuming focus on building a life with Ryan and raising Ethan, I had deliberately buried a memory. The memory wasn't of fire. It was of a letter, an announcement in a newspaper. College entrance exams reinstated. It was the trigger. In my first life, that announcement had been the starting pistol for the chain of events that led to my death. Jason had returned, full of desperate ambition, and Wendy Vance had needed a ticket to legitimacy. My registration spot had been their target. Now the same historical tide was rising, thousands of miles away. But the principle felt ominously familiar. An era of new opportunities was dawning. And sitting in our cozy living room, a toddler at my feet, a simple wife and mother, I felt a strange, hollow ache I couldn't name. Ryan, attuned to every shift in my weather, muted the radio. "What is it?" "Nothing," I said too quickly, picking up a block Ethan had thrown. "Just thinking how fast the world is changing." He watched me, his perceptive eyes missing nothing. "It is," he said simply, but he filed my reaction away. The ache didn't leave. It grew into a quiet yearning. I'd watch the young enlisted men and their wives, some barely out of high school, talking about taking correspondence courses about the new community college programs. I'd catch myself staring at the shelves of Ryan's technical manuals, My old dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, feeling a hunger for something beyond PTA meetings and grocery lists. I had a mind. I'd once dreamed of being a teacher, a writer, something. In my desperation to escape my first life, I'd thrown myself into being Ryan's wife and Ethan's mother with everything I had. I didn't regret it for a second. But a part of me felt unformed. I confessed this to Maggie one afternoon over tea while Ethan napped. I feel guilty even thinking it. I have everything I ever wanted. More. Maggie, wise and blunt, patted my hand. Honey, building a life with a good man and raising a fine boy is a magnificent thing. But it ain't the only thing. You're what, 26? Your brain ain't done yet. Wanting to use it doesn't mean you love them any less. Ryan came home that night to find me quiet, staring out at the darkening peak. He put Ethan to bed and returned, sitting beside me on the sofa. Talk to me, Chloe. The words tumbled out, clumsy and fraught with guilt. I love our life. I love you and Ethan more than anything. But sometimes I feel like I stopped. Like I'm just waiting. And I see these kids talking about school, about futures, and I feel so old and left behind. It's stupid. He was silent for a long moment. Then he got up, went to his small desk in the corner and pulled out a folder. He handed it to me. Inside were brochures. For the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. For extension programs. For a local community college. They were creased, studied. I've been looking at these for 6 months, he said quietly. Waiting for you to be ready. Tears welled in my eyes. You knew. I know you. You have a light in you, Chloe. It's why I fell in love with you from your father's stories long before I met you. You're curious. You're brave. Being a mother, my wife, it hasn't dimmed that light. It's just given it a warmer glow. But it needs other fuel too. It feels selfish. Ethan is so little. You're so busy. He knelt in front of me, taking my hands. Listen to me. You gave up everything once for a dream that was a lie. You will not give up anything for a dream that is true. Not on my watch. We are a team. If you want to learn, to study, then we will make it work. We have Maggie. We have the base daycare. We have me. His unwavering support was the permission I didn't know I needed. I tentatively enrolled in a single evening literature class at the community college. The first night, Ryan handled bath and bedtime alone. I drove to the campus, my heart pounding as if I were going into battle. Sitting in a classroom again, notebook open, discussing symbolism in Fitzgerald, I felt a dormant part of my soul spark back to life. I came home buzzing to find a sleepy Ryan on the sofa, a successfully pajama-clad Ethan asleep on his chest. How was it? He whispered. It was amazing, I whispered back, tears in my eyes again. This time from joy. I took another class. Then the world of ideas opened up to me and I thrived. Ryan was my steadfast anchor, managing his command responsibilities and fatherhood with a grace that left me in awe. Our love deepened in a new way. We were no longer just lovers and parents, but active believers in each other's growth. Then a second ripple. This one was a letter, but not from Jason. It was from my mother. News from our old hometown. Jason Miller is back, she wrote. He's married that Wendy Vance girl. Her family has money but no standing. Rumor is they're desperate for her to get into college to clean up the family name. They're asking a lot of questions about you, dear. Just be aware. The past didn't just echo, it was circling back. The news settled in my gut like a stone. The old fear, the memory of smoke, clawed at the edges of my new confidence. I showed Ryan the letter. His face went into that familiar, terrifying neutral mask. Are you registered for any national exams? Anything with a spot someone could covet? I wasn't. My path was local, incremental. But the question hung in the air. The reinstated exams my mother vaguely referenced were a different system, a different country. Yet the pattern was sickeningly familiar. Ambition. Desperation. A target. He can't touch me here, I said, but it sounded like a question. Ryan's jaw tightened. No. He can't. But he increased the frequency of the quiet check-ins with the local sheriff. He made sure my schedule was unpredictable. He loved me harder, as if his love alone could form an impenetrable shield. The crisis, when it came, was both anticlimactic and definitive. Came via another letter, this one to my parents, who forwarded it to me. It was from Jason. Not a plea but a venomous screed. He blamed me for his failures, for his miserable marriage, for his lack of prospects. He accused me of stealing his future by choosing a mindless brute over him. The final line was a chillingly familiar threat. You think you're safe in your little military bubble? Everyone's luck runs out, Chloe. Ryan read it, his expression glacial. He didn't say a word. He simply took the letter, placed it in a clear plastic bag and drove to the sheriff's office. He also made a call to a contact at the FBI. Stalking and interstate threats were taken seriously, especially concerning the family of a serving officer. We learned later that Jason was visited by federal agents. The combination of his existing debts, his unstable behavior, and the formal interest of the authorities was the final push. Wendy's family, seeing him as a liability, cut him loose. He disappeared from our old hometown, his path diverging from ours forever. The external threat was neutralized, but the internal shift it caused was permanent. The last vestige of the scared, haunted girl was gone. In her place was a woman who had looked the ghost of her past in the eye and not flinched. A woman protected by love, yes, but also strengthened by her own growing purpose. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I found Ryan on the porch, staring into the dark. I wrapped my arms around his waist from behind, resting my cheek against his strong back. "It's over," I said. He covered my hands with his. "It was over the day you chose me," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But now it's sealed." I turned him to face me. The moon lit his beloved features. "I'm not just choosing you, Ryan. I'm choosing the life we're building and the woman I'm becoming in it. With you." He kissed me then, under the vast Colorado sky, a kiss of possession, gratitude, and a shared, unshakable faith in our tomorrow. The tides of change had washed in, threatened our shores, and receded. We were still standing, stronger, and ready for whatever came next. The quiet years that followed were the happiest of my life. Both lives. With the specter of Jason finally banished, a profound peace settled over our home. My world was a triangle. The sun-warmed kitchen where Ethan drew fantastical pictures of jets and dinosaurs, the small campus library where I buried myself in textbooks, and the strong, steady circle of Ryan's arms at the end of every day. My studies became more than a hobby. They became a part of me. I changed my major twice, finally settling on psychology. I wanted to understand the human mind, its resilience and its breaking points. I think secretly I was trying to understand the alchemy that had saved me, the psychology of love, of sacrifice, of second chances. Ryan supported every shift without question, his pride in me a quiet, constant force. Ethan grew from a solemn toddler into a bright, energetic boy with his father's analytical mind and a surprising streak of artistic tenderness from, well, perhaps from the me I was finally allowing myself to be. Our family expanded, not with another child just yet, but with space. We built an addition to the house, a sunroom that became my study, lined with books and Ethan's latest masterpieces taped to the windows. Ryan made lieutenant colonel. The promotion meant more responsibility, longer hours sometimes, but also a deeper, more strategic role he thrived in. He was a leader who commanded respect not through fear, but through unshakable competence and a deep personal care for the men and women under his command. I saw him come home weary, sometimes weighed down by decisions I couldn't fathom, but he always shed that burden at the threshold, becoming simply Dad the moment Ethan launched himself at his legs. We were a team, a perfect, balanced ecosystem. And then, in the summer of 1981, we discovered we were to become a team of 4. The pregnancy with our daughter was different from the start. Easier, filled with a bubbly, anticipatory joy unmarred by past shadows. We told Ethan he was going to be a big brother. He spent a week solemnly moving his toys to one side of his room, to make space. One evening, about halfway through the pregnancy, Ryan came home with a peculiar, focused look. He waited until after dinner, after Ethan's bedtime story. "We need to talk about names," he said, uncharacteristically tentative. "We have time," I smiled, rubbing my rounded belly. "I know. But I've been thinking about your mother." My smile faded. "My mother? Eleanor. It's a good strong name. But your middle name? Lily." I froze. Lily. A name from a lifetime ago. A name I hadn't used, hadn't thought of in years. Chloe Lily Evans. I'd buried it with the ghost. "How did you know that?" I whispered. I'd never told him. In this life I was just Chloe. He looked down at his hands. Your father. When I first asked for permission to write to you years before we met, he told me about you. Said you hated Lily, thought it was old-fashioned. You made everyone call you Chloe. But he said, when you were very little, before you decided to be fierce, you were his little Lily. Tears sprang to my eyes. The memory was a ghost from childhood, long overshadowed by later drama. I haven't been Lily in a very long time. I know. He moved to sit beside me, his hand coming to rest over mine on my belly. But that's the point. That little girl, she's a part of you. The part before the world got complicated. The part that was just pure potential. I thought, if it's a girl, maybe we could honor her. Not the name you left behind, but the you that was always there. The beginning. The love that swelled in my chest was so vast it was painful. He wasn't just marrying me, Chloe, the woman I'd become. He was reaching back through time, gathering up all the fragments of me, the hopeful child, the rebellious teen, the haunted ghost, the redeemed wife, and holding them all as precious. He wanted to name our daughter after my truest, most untouched self. Lily, I breathed, testing the sound. It didn't feel like a relic anymore. Felt like a gift. Lily Eleanor Cooper. He nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Only if you want to. I do, I said and kissed him. It was a seal on the past, a full, final acceptance. Lily Eleanor Cooper entered the world on a stormy April night, with a shock of dark hair and a cry that was less a wail and more an indignant announcement of her arrival. Where Ethan had been calm observation, Lily was fierce, immediate engagement. She demanded to be at the center of everything, her dark eyes, my eyes, Ryan said with wonder, missing nothing. Ethan at 5 years old was mesmerized. He appointed himself her chief protector and interpreter, convinced he could understand her gurgles. Our home, once a haven of orderly quiet, was now filled with the chaotic, beautiful symphony of a little boy's elaborate stories and a baby's insistent, joyful noise. Ryan was utterly enslaved. The stern lieutenant colonel would come home, hang up his hat, and immediately get on the floor to be climbed upon by his son or lie patiently as his daughter tugged experimentally on his nose. He changed diapers with the efficiency of a field medic and sang off-key lullabies about parachute jumps. It was during these sweet, chaotic years that the wider world pressed in again, this time in the best possible way. The political frost of the Cold War was beginning to show hairline fractures. Cultural exchanges were starting. And one day a notice came to the base. A pilot program for family posting abroad, to a joint NATO training facility in West Germany. A 2-year assignment. Ryan brought the packet home, his expression unreadable. It's an opportunity. Good for the career. An experience for the kids. But it's far. It's uprooting everything. It's your decision, Chloe. I looked around our sun-filled, book-crammed, toy-strewn home. Our fortress. Our sanctuary. Uproot this? Take a toddler and an infant across an ocean? But I also saw the keen, carefully hidden interest in Ryan's eyes. A challenge. A chance to serve in a new way, to learn, to lead on an international stage. And for the children, the world. I thought of my own narrow, fear-bound first life. I wanted to give them wings, not walls. When do we leave? I asked. The logistics were monstrous. Packing up a life. Immunizations. Passports for 2 small citizens. Goodbyes to Maggie, who wept and promised to mind the fort. My parents, worried but excited for us. The flight was a marathon of diaper changes, toddler meltdowns and sustained parental endurance. But we landed in Frankfurt as a team, weary but triumphant. Germany was a revelation. It was ancient stone and sleek modernism, the scent of diesel and baking bread, a language of harsh, graceful sounds we slowly learned to navigate. We lived in a tidy stone house on the edge of the base, with a gardens where Lily learned to walk on thick green grass. Ryan's work was demanding, often taking him away for short exercises. But when he was home we explored. We drove through storybook Black Forest villages, visited medieval castles that made Ethan whisper about knights, and stood at the edge of history at the Berlin Wall. A stark, grim reality that felt both distant and deeply personal to a soldier like Ryan. I continued my studies through correspondence, my textbooks spread on German kitchen tables. I made friends with other NATO wives, British, Italian, German, forging bonds over playground benches and shared confusion about local customs. Our family unit, under the pressure of being foreigners in a strange land, became even tighter, more self-reliant, more deeply our own country of four. It was in Germany that I had the final, quiet reckoning with my past. It came on a gray drizzling afternoon. The children were napping and I was in a small English-language bookstore in the nearby town. I wandered to the fiction section and a name on a spine jumped out at me. Jason Miller. My breath hitched. It was a slim volume of poetry, published by a small press in San Francisco. With trembling fingers I pulled it out. The bio on the back flap was brief. Jason Miller lives in Northern California. This is his first collection. There was no dedication. The poems were what I'd expect, full of angst and vague, unearned longing, the kind that mistook self-pity for depth. But as I flipped through, one short poem near the end stopped me cold. It was titled Phosphorus. I struck the match not for heat, but to see my own face in the sudden light. The shape I burned was only ever the outline of my own emptiness. Now I live in the long, cold smoke and call it wisdom. It wasn't a confession. It was too oblique, too pleased with its own melancholy for that. But I understood. He had rewritten the narrative. In his mind, the fire was a metaphor, his crime transformed into a poetic tragedy. He would never truly face what he had done. He would spend his life crafting elegant excuses for his own ugliness. I closed the book and put it back on the shelf. There was no anger. No fear. Just a vast, oceanic pity and a profound sense of separation. We inhabited different universes now. His was small, dark and self-referential. Mine was vast, filled with the messy, roaring, beautiful life of my family. I walked out into the soft German rain, the mist cool on my face. I felt lighter than I had in 2 lifetimes. The last thread, the last psychic connection to that old horror had finally dissolved. He was just a man somewhere writing mediocre poems. I was Chloe Cooper, wife of Ryan, mother of Ethan and Lily, student, explorer. I was free. When I got home, Ryan was back early, building a blanket fort with the kids in the living room. He looked up, saw my face, and knew without a word that something had settled. He didn't ask. He just held out a hand, inviting me into the fortress of blankets and giggles. Crawling inside, surrounded by the smell of fabric and my children's shampoo, with Ryan's arm around me and Lily babbling in my lap, I knew I had crossed a final frontier. The journey that began in ashes was now leading us, into a future so bright and sprawling it made my heart ache with joy. We were no longer defined by what we had escaped, but by what we were building together, one joyful, ordinary, extraordinary day at a time. Germany was a dream, but like all dreams it had to end. The 2-year posting felt both endless and fleeting. We returned to Colorado in the summer of '83, seasoned travelers now, our luggage stuffed with cuckoo clocks, steins, and Ethan's collection of meticulously pressed leaves from the Black Forest. We were welcomed back like prodigal sons and daughters by Maggie and the tight-knit base community. Our bungalow, cared for in our absence, felt both intimately familiar and curiously small. Our world had expanded. The walls seemed to have drawn closer in our absence. Ryan resumed his duties with new authority, his international experience adding a layer of polish to his command. The children slotted back into American life. Ethan started first grade, a serious boy with a faint German accent on certain words that made him endlessly interesting to his classmates. Lily, a chatterbox of 3, ruled the playground with fearless, diplomatic charm. And I, after the stimulating chaos of Europe, felt the quiet of home settle around me like a fine dust. I finished my psychology degree through a combination of correspondence and local courses, graduating with honors in a small ceremony where Ryan sat beaming, a child on each knee. The achievement was sweet, but it left a vacuum. What now? The question which had driven me to study now loomed larger than ever. I'd proven I could learn. Now I needed to do. The old yearning for purpose which had first driven me to a classroom, returned with a sharper edge. I loved being a mother, but Lily was in preschool part-time, Ethan was forging his own world at school. The hours stretched, empty and echoing. Ryan saw it. He always saw it. One evening as I was mechanically folding laundry, he took a tiny sock from my hands. "You're restless." "I'm fine. Just adjusting." "You're a force of nature, Chloe. You're not built for just adjusting." He led me to the sofa. "Talk to me. What do you need?" The words tumbled out messy and raw. "I need to matter. Out there. Not just in here. I have this degree, this brain, and I feel like I'm using it to optimize grocery lists. I see the other officers' wives, some with their own careers, some perfectly happy volunteering, and I don't know where I fit. I'm not the girl I was, and I'm not just a mom. Who am I now? He listened, his face a portrait of thoughtful concentration. You're Chloe Cooper, he said finally, as if it were the answer to everything. And Chloe Cooper can do anything she sets her mind to. What does matching look like? I didn't have a clear answer. But an opportunity, or perhaps a summons, presented itself a week later. The base family support center was looking for a part-time counselor. A new position, funded by a pilot grant, aimed at helping military spouses and teens cope with deployment stress, frequent moves, the unique pressures of this life. My psychology degree was the baseline qualification. My life, as a military wife, a mother, a woman who had rebuilt herself from emotional rubble, was the real resume. It's you, Ryan said simply when I showed him the flyer, his finger tapping the requirements. This is what matching looks like. I was terrified. Professional role? Me. I'd been a student for so long, safe in the world of theory. This was practice. This was real people with real pain. What if I'm not good enough? I whispered, the old ghost of insecurity rising. He took my face in his hands, his touch steadying. Listen to me. You have a strength in you, a compassion that comes from having been broken and choosing to heal. You understand fear. You understand resilience. That's what they need. Not just a textbook. With his unwavering belief as my armor, I applied. I got the job. The first time I sat in the small, sunny office, the chair facing me empty, I nearly bolted. But then my first client walked in. A young wife, 19 years old, her husband on his first deployment. She was pale, her hands shaking as she clutched a tissue. She was terrified of the silence in her apartment, of the news headlines, of her own overwhelming loneliness. I saw myself in her. Not the me from this life, but the ghost of the first Chloe, lost, afraid, disconnected. I didn't quote a single theory. I just listened. And then I said, the silence is the hardest part, isn't it? It makes all the fear sound so loud. She looked up, her eyes wide with recognition, and burst into tears. In that moment I found my purpose. I wasn't a savior, I was a guide. A fellow traveler who knew the map of this particular emotional terrain. The work was draining and profoundly rewarding. I heard stories of anxiety, of marriages straining under the weight of absence, of teenagers angry at a parent they felt had chosen duty over them. I didn't always have answers, but I offered a space to be heard, strategies to cope, and the powerful, simple validation that their feelings were normal, they were not alone. Ryan was my rock. He'd listen when I came home heavy with a client's pain, not offering solutions, just letting me decompress. He handled dinner, homework, and bath times with seamless efficiency on my late evenings. Our partnership deepened into a true collaboration. Two professionals, two parents, two lovers holding up the sky for each other. My growing confidence in my professional skin bled into the rest of my life. I started a small support group for spouses, which Maggie enthusiastically joined, soon becoming its de facto social director. I felt grounded, useful, whole. It was during this period of settled purpose that the past made its final, unexpected appearance. Not as a threat, but as a closure. A letter arrived, forwarded from my parents. The handwriting was an elderly, spidery version of a script I knew. It was from Jason's mother, Eleanor Miller. With a deep sense of calm I would not have imagined possible years before, I opened it. It was not an apology. It was an obituary notice. Jason Miller had died in a car accident in Oregon. Single with no children. The letter was a stark, dry notification, as if completing a bureaucratic duty. At the bottom, in a rushed postscript, she had written, "He was a troubled soul. I believe your path was the wiser one. I am sorry for any grief he caused you." I sat at my kitchen table, the Colorado sun streaming in, and read the single paragraph over and over. I felt nothing. No vindication. No sorrow. Just a quiet, final click, like the last page of a long, sad book being turned. The protagonist of my nightmare was gone. The story was truly over. When Ryan came home I showed him the letter. He read it, his expression impassive. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in the trash. "He was a ghost long before this," Ryan said, pulling me into a hug. "Now he's just a fact. He doesn't get any more of your energy. Not even a moment of reflection." He was right. The grief, the fear, the what-ifs. I had processed them all in a therapist's chair in Germany, staring at a book of bad poetry. This was just a period on a sentence written long ago. That night, after the kids were asleep, we sat on the porch swing. The mountains were a dark silhouette against a star-pricked sky. "Do you ever think about it?" I asked softly. "The first time? What you saw, after?" He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. "Every day," he said, his voice rough. "Not the bad parts. Not the fire. I think about the 10 years after. Following you. Watching over you. Being with you even when you couldn't see me." He turned his head, his eyes gleaming in the starlight. "In a strange way, Chloe, I'm grateful for that time. As hellish as it was. It was 10 more years I got to love you. Made me sure. So sure that when I got the second chance I would move heaven and earth to get it right." Tears streamed down my face, silent and warm. "You did," I whispered. "You have." He kissed my tears away. "We did. Together." The following spring, a new opportunity landed on Ryan's desk. A teaching and advisory position at the Pentagon. A stateside job based in Washington, D.C. It was a prestigious post, a capstone to a fine career, but it meant leaving Colorado, our home, our roots. We discussed it for nights, maps spread on the floor, pros and cons listed. Ethan, now 9, was wary but intrigued by the idea of museums and monuments. Lily, 5, was ready for any adventure Daddy proposed. "It's your career," I said finally. "This is a huge honor." "It's our life," he corrected. "Is this a life you want? Busier, more political, farther from the mountains?" I looked around our home, at the sunroom I'd built, at the marks on the doorframe charting the children's growth, at the view of Pikes Peak we'd woken to for over a decade. Then I looked at Ryan, at the quiet hope and steadfast patience in his eyes. He would stay if I asked. He would turn down the pinnacle of his profession for my happiness. I thought of the frightened young wife I'd counseled, of the vast, complex world I was now connected to through my work. I thought of the children and the horizons we could show them. "Let's go," I said, my voice firm. "Our home isn't this house, Ryan. This. All 4 of us. Let's go build a new one." The smile that broke across his face was one of pure, unadulterated joy and pride. In that moment I knew I was no longer following him, no longer simply being protected by him. We were walking side by side, partners navigating the future, our hands firmly clasped, our shared gravity pulling us toward the next great adventure. Washington, D.C. was a different kind of mountain range, one of marble power and immense humming energy. We traded our view of Pikes Peak for a view of the Capitol dome from the window of a rented townhouse in Alexandria. The air smelled of cherry blossoms and diesel, and the pace of life shifted from the steady march of a base to the frenetic sprint of the Beltway. Ryan's new role at the Pentagon was demanding in a cerebral, politically nuanced way. He navigated corridors of power with the same quiet competence he'd shown in the field, but I saw the new lines of stress around his eyes at the end of some days. He was playing a game with invisible rules, and he missed the direct, clear-cut leadership of his command. I missed Colorado too, the vast silence, the earthy smell of pines, Maggie's blunt friendship. But I also felt a strange, electric thrill. Here, my work at the Family Support Center felt amplified. I was asked to consult on a new Department of Defense initiative for spouse mental health, my practical experience from Colorado and Germany giving weight to my words in sterile conference rooms. I started writing a column for a military family magazine, The Home Front, offering advice and solidarity. Letters from readers, spouses from Alaska to Florida, poured in. You put into words what I couldn't. You made me feel less alone. This was mattering on a scale I'd never imagined. Ethan, our serious scholar, thrived. He devoured books on American history and dragged us to every museum on the mall, explaining exhibits with a precocious focus. Lily, our social comet, made friends on every playground and declared the National Zoo her second home. Our family unit transplanted, put down quick, resilient roots in the rich foreign soil of the capital. The years folded into one another, a tapestry of school plays, Ryan promotions he made full colonel, deadlines for my column and family trips to Civil War battlefields and sandy beaches. The ghostly memory of my first life was just that. A memory faint and foreign like a story about someone else. Then in the fall of Ethan's senior year of high school, the universe offered a full-circle moment so perfect it felt scripted. I was invited to give a keynote speech at a national conference for military family support organizations. The venue was a grand hotel in downtown DC. As I stood backstage reviewing my notes on resilience and community, my hands were steady. I was Chloe Cooper, expert columnist counselor. I belonged here. I walked onto the stage to polite applause. The lights were bright, but I found Ryan immediately in the third row, sitting between a fidgety, proud Ethan and a beaming Lily. He gave me a small, firm nod, our old signal. You are safe. You are capable. Go. I began to speak. I spoke of isolation, of the unique strength found in military communities, of the silent battles fought on the home front. I shared stories, anonymous of course, of the wives and teenagers I'd counseled. And then I did something I hadn't planned. I looked at Ryan. My understanding of this life, I said, my voice softening, was not learned in a textbook. It was learned from a silent man who loved me with a depth I was too young and foolish to see at first. It was learned through a second chance I did not deserve, but was gifted through his unwavering devotion. He taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a deliberate, daily act of service. It's showing up. It's building a fortress of ordinary moments so strong that when the storms come, and they always do, you have a place to weather them together. Ryan's eyes glistened in the stage lights. He didn't look away. We, the families, I continued, pulling my gaze back to the audience, we are the garrison. We hold the line. And our weapon is not stoicism but connection. Our armor is not silence but asking for help. Our victory is not just getting through it but growing through it, together. The applause that followed was thunderous. Afterward, I was surrounded by people wanting to talk, to share their stories. Ryan waited patiently at the edge of the crowd, a quiet sentinel. When I finally broke free, he took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. No words were needed. Later that night, after the kids were settled, we sat on our small balcony overlooking the city lights. The autumn air was crisp. You were magnificent, he said, his voice husky. You were my inspiration. You always have been. He was quiet for a moment. I got orders today. My heart stuttered. Orders. He was due for a new assignment, but we'd assumed it would be another DC staff job or a command nearby. Fort Carson, Colorado. Deputy Commanding General. He said it evenly, watching my face. Colorado. Home. The mountains, the thin air, the memory of our beginning. Ethan would be off to college next year. He was aiming for the Air Force Academy, a dream that filled Ryan with a pride so profound it was almost comical. Lily would start high school. And we would go back to where it all began. Tears, happy and overwhelmed, filled my eyes. A general? A slow, humble smile touched his lips. It seems so. And we're going home. If you want to, we can discuss. I cut him off with a kiss. There's nothing to discuss. Yes. The move 2 years later was a homecoming in every sense. We didn't go back to our old bungalow. It was too small for a general's needs and a teenage daughter. We moved into a larger house on post with a porch that faced the same majestic front range. The first person to show up at our door with a casserole was Maggie, her hair fully gray now, her embrace just as fierce. Told you you'd be back, she whispered, squeezing me tight. Told you that man would never let you go far. Ryan stepped into his new role with the grace of a man finally returning to his native element. He was a leader of leaders now, his influence shaping the culture of an entire division. He still came home for dinner whenever humanly possible. Lily blossomed in the Colorado sunshine, becoming a fierce competitor on the high school track team. Ethan left for the academy, his departure a bittersweet ache that was soothed by the sheer rightness of his path. We were so proud it hurt. And I came full circle. I opened a private practice in Colorado Springs, specializing in trauma and resilience, drawing clients from both the military and civilian communities. I continued to write my column. I taught a class at the local college. My life was a rich, busy tapestry woven from the threads of all my selves. The survivor, the student, the counselor, the writer, the mother, the wife. One golden autumn afternoon, decades after our first arrival in Colorado, Ryan and I took a drive. We didn't speak much, comfortable in the silence that had long since ceased to be empty and was now filled with the profound language of known and cherished companionship. He pulled off the highway onto a familiar gravel road, one I hadn't traveled in over 30 years. He stopped the car in front of a small, well-kept bungalow. Our first home. The yellow curtains were gone, replaced by shutters, but the porch swings still hung, creaking gently in the breeze. It came on the market, he said simply. I bought it. Ryan, why? He turned to me, his face older, lined with years of laughter and sun and concern, more handsome to me than ever. I wanted to walk through it with you. One last time. Before we let it go to a new young family. Hand in hand we walked up the path. The current tenants, a young sergeant and his pregnant wife, were expecting us. They let us in, then discreetly vanished to the backyard. The interior was different. New paint, different furniture, but the bones were the same. The sunroom was a playroom now, littered with toys. I could almost see myself there, a terrified young ghost of a bride, staring at textbooks, fighting for a future I couldn't yet envision. We stood in the doorway of the master bedroom. Ryan's arms came around me from behind, his chin resting on my silver-streaked hair. This is where you conquered me, he murmured into my hair. This is where you saved me, I corrected, leaning back into his strength. We saved each other. We walked out to the backyard where the young couple stood. The wife had her hand on her rounded belly, her eyes wide with the same mix of hope and anxiety I must have once shown. Ryan shook the sergeant's hand, spoke a few quiet, encouraging words about the unit. I took the young woman's hands. It's a good house, I said. Strong. It holds love well. She smiled a little shyly. Thank you, ma'am. We hope so. As we drove away, the sun began to set behind Pikes Peak, painting the sky in strokes of violet and gold. Ryan reached across the console and took my hand, his thumb rubbing over my wedding bands. The simple one from our courthouse day and the steadfast one from his grandmother. I have a question, he said, his eyes on the radiant horizon. After all this time you still have questions? Just one. If you could go back to that diner with all you know now, what would you say to that scared, angry girl? I didn't hesitate. I saw her so clearly, the girl who thought love was a dramatic flame, who couldn't see the steady, enduring sun right in front of her. I'd tell her to stop looking at the door, waiting for an escape, I said softly, watching the mountains swallow the sun. I'd tell her to look at the man sitting across from her. Really look. And I'd say, take his hand. He's not your prison. He's your way home. And the journey with him will be the greatest adventure of your life. Ryan brought my hand to his lips and kissed it, his eyes closed for a moment. When he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. She listened, he said, his voice rough with emotion. She learned, I replied. We drove in peaceful silence back toward our home, toward our daughter, toward the life we had built. Not from the ashes of a tragedy, but from the conscious daily choice to love, to trust, to grow. The journey that began with a blind date in a sunlit diner, that wound through fire and grief, across oceans and back, had led us here. To this quiet road, this joined hand, this profound and ordinary peace. We had traveled through 2 lifetimes to find each other. And we had finally, completely come home. The end.